السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا مولانا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. ثم أما بعد. So we are reading from ترتيب أو تدريب السالك إلى قراءة أقرب المسالك إمام مالك رضي الله عنه, and we are reading from the books or the chapters that deal with the acts of worship. And we have reached the final two chapters in the what's called the Ruba al-Ibadat, or the first quarter dealing with acts of worship. And the two chapters that we're contending with, hopefully in this session, something called al-Yamin, which can be loosely translated as oaths, wal-Nadhr, which can be vows. And they sound similar in English, but in Arabic they have slightly different connotations, as we will see. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا الدارين آمين باب في اليمين. So this chapter dealing with yamin, and here he defines it. اليمين حلف المكلف على إثبات أمر أو نفيه أو لزومه نفسه أو غيره بفعل أو ترك بقسم أو تعليق على قربة أو حل عصمة. So he says the yamin, making an oath, or sometimes we can translate it as a qasam, because it involves qasam, which is swearing by God. Halifun, so to swear. Al-mukallaf, so someone who is of sin al-taklif, someone who is post-pubescent. So that means anything not in the definition doesn't fall under the yamin. So if a child says wallahi a lot, and says wallahi I will do this or do that, then this doesn't apply to them, even though from kind of the perspective of child rearing, that should not be encouraged, that they say wallahi all the time. So he says haliful mukallafi, so the mukallaf, the one who's ethically more responsible, ala ithbati amrin, so to swear on a matter that is ithbat amr, so affirming an affirmation, affirming something, aw nafihi, or negating something, aw luzumihi nafsahu, right, or to swear about something that he will do, aw ghayrahu, or someone else, right, an action bifa'al, aw tarkin, or not to do something, biqasam, right, qasam means to say wallahi, aw billahi, aw tallahi, any of the siyagh al-qasam, by Allah, aw ta'liqin ala qurbah, which ta'liq means to make it conditional upon something, and he says conditional upon a qurbah. A qurbah is something meritorious, like an act of worship. أو حل عصمة, أو حل عصمة, which means to pronounce a divorce. So this includes all of the different scenarios that can happen. So generally, al-yamin is going to be jaiz, it's going to be permissible. And Sheikh Zarruq said one should neither do it too often or too little, so somewhere in between. And the scholars of Arabic language say that when you preface something with a qasam, like saying wallahi, then in terms of fasaha, in terms of eloquence, you're talking to somebody who's mustankir. Mustankir means that they don't believe you, or they have a hard time believing it, or you suspect that they would have a hard time believing it, so you would say it in that emphatic way, Wallahi مصر فاز بالقياس العالم مثلا, something like unbelievable, just a joke, but if you say by Allah Egypt has won the World Cup, right, because that sounds amazing, so people would probably say Wallahi and something like this. And the Prophet ﷺ did use the qasam, and the one that he would use most often, as reported by some, لا ومقلب القلوب, لا ومقلب القلوب. If he was going to negate something, he would say no, by the one who turns the hearts, or whose the hearts is in his possession. So it is a rhetorical device. It is used in language, and it should be used in the proper place and the proper time, right? So when you have someone in front of you, where it might be advised to use it, because what you're going to tell them might be hard to believe, or you think based upon the disposition of the person that they may have a hard time accepting it, then in that case. But it should not be used casually, and it should not be used frivolously, and it should not be used too often because this is a heavy thing, right? There's a whole chapter in fiqh about it. So we should take that into consideration. So some of the examples like ithbat amr or nafi, like affirming something or negating something, like wallahi, tomorrow is Wednesday, right? Which is not some kind of a meaningless thing because we know that, but let's say you have someone in front of you who was, you know, unconscious for days and they're not sure what day it is, and you know, no, it's not Friday yet, wallahi, tomorrow is Wednesday. So ithbat amr, right? So you're saying this is going to be happening in the future. Or you say, wallahi, tomorrow is not Friday. So this is a negation. أو لزوم نفسه أو غيره بفعل أو ترك بقسم. So here لزوم means that you are saying that I am going to do something, an act. Wallahi, tomorrow I will go to work. Or wallahi, tomorrow my brother is going to go to work. So that's somebody else. Or wallahi, tomorrow I'm not going to work. Or wallahi, tomorrow my brother is not going to work. So those are all the different. You can make it as something that is ithbat, which is affirming, or negation. أو تعليق على قربة. تعليق على قربة means that you are saying if something happens, a particular scenario, then you're going to do a particular qurba, a particular act of worship. Like if you say, if you read this book or if you read this chapter from the Quran, I will fast tomorrow. So, and then you have to say, wallahi. Wallahi لو إن قرأت هذا الكتاب سأصوم غدا. Then it makes it part of this chapter. أو حل عصمة, which unfortunately, in of itself, to make a ta'liq, right, which is to make it conditional, pronouncing the words on someone, is haram to begin with. But if people do it, then we have to know the rules that apply to it. So like if someone said to their wife, if you go out today, in kharajti layla fanti taliq, مثلا. If you go out today, then you are divorced. And, you know, I was telling a friend Omar that probably this is the most complex chapter, one of the most complex chapters in terms of all of the different scenarios that can be thought of, because unfortunately people have made all of these different scenarios. And so this underscores the idea that fiqh is dealing with legal issues, and so the fuqaha will then contend with the issues as they come. And so you have all of these different scenarios of how a man could possibly pronounce divorce on his wife, conditionally on certain things occurring or not occurring, or certain actions of hers, or certain actions of his, or certain actions of a third party. But one should not get the impression of all these different scenarios that are listed, not in this book that we're reading from, it's a mukhtasar, but in some of the mutawalat, some of the longer encyclopedic sort of books of fiqh, do not get the impression that that thing is allowed or that it's condoned by the ulama. No, the legal scholars are contending with the issues and they have to answer people's questions. But if you look to the books of tazkiyah and akhlaq and character development, they would tell you no decent Muslim, right, who knows his deen and is muttaqi, has taqwa, would do such a thing, would make yani talaq mu'allaq, yani to make it conditional upon something. And unfortunately, this maybe is not so much a trend or an issue in non-Muslim majority countries or English-speaking countries, at least my experience. But unfortunately, it's quite the issue in many Muslim majority countries, whether they're Arabic speaking or Urdu speaking or Malay speaking. So that's unfortunately something that is not going to be remedied necessarily by. There are some legal things that are being done to remedy it in some countries, but it also is going to take a very concerted effort on the part of the murabbin, people who are training people and teaching them and educating them that this is just simply not acceptable. So, Allah musta'an. The next line, وإنما يجوز القسم باسم من أسماء الله كوالله والرحمن والخالق أو بصفة من صفاته كقدرة الله وحياته وكلامه ولو بآية من القرآن. And as far as the qasam, the swearing itself, or to say by Allah, you can say one of the names of Allah, like Wallahi or War-Rahman, or Wal-Khaliq, Allah is the creator, أو بصفة من صفاته, يعني بقدرة الله أو يعني with by the power of Allah, وحياته, وَكَلَامِهِ, like his kalam, his speech, وَلَوْ بِآيَةٍ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, because the ayah from the Quran is indicative of the meanings of the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of them also said ما يعظم, right, like وَالْكَعْبَةِ وَالْمُصْحَفِ, things that maybe not literally indicate Allah, but they are understood to mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In some countries they even say وَالنَّبِي, which is swearing by the Prophet. The Maliki don't particularly mention that, but I believe some of the Hanabla allowed it because it's ta'zeem of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's, making that what Allah has made great, which is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also. So it's not, there's khilaf about whether you can say it or not, but certainly it's not an act of shirk to say one Nabi. Right? That's definitely not the case. And especially we look at the intent of the person. So we could say it's haram, we could say it's makruh, we could say it's permissible, but to say it is shirk, and by saying it you are going to be outside of Islam, this is ghulu. This is an extremist position that is rejected by the madhahib, by the Sunni scholars. طيب. ولا كفارة في قسم بغير الله ولا في ماضٍ. And there is no kafara, which is an expiation, because that's why this whole chapter we're talking about it. There's going to be a certain expiation if you make an oath or you swear about something and it doesn't come true or you don't do it, then you're going to have to expiate. So this is only going to apply. It says لا كفارة في قسم بغير الله, not for a qasam, not for swearing by other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ولا في ماضٍ, or by something that happened in the past. How would it look like if it happened in the past? If you say والله رأيت زيدا البارحة, wallahi I saw Zayd yesterday. If you say that, like, and you're pretty sure it was Zayd that you saw, and you say it meaning that, but it turned out not to be Zayd, you don't have to do anything. However, if you were not sure, or if you purposefully lied, this is what's called al-yamin al-ghamus, right? Which is also, if you did it in like a court testimony, it would be qawl az-zur, which is one of the kaba'ir, right? Which is one of the grave or the deadly sins. So there's no kafara for that, but you have to do tawbah, right? No expiation, but one has to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is an enormity to do such a thing. To swear about something that you're not sure about, or that you know is not true. وَمَنْ حَلَفَ عَلَى غَيْرِ يَقِينٍ أَثِمَ مُطْلَقًا وَكَفَّرَ فِي غَيْرِ الْمَاضِي. And we just said that. كَالْمُتَيَقِّنِ فِي الْحَالِ. So anyone who swears about something they're not sure about, then certainly they're sinful when they do that. أثِمَ مُطْلَقًا, without condition. وَكَفَّرَ فِي غَيْرِ الْمَاضِي. But you would have to do an expiation in the madi, for something that didn't happen in the past. So if you say it about something in the present, or about something that's yet to come, then you would have to do an expiation. And he's going to get to what that expiation is. وَالْحَالِفُ عَلَى تَرْكِ أَمْرٍ لَا يَحْنَثُ إِلَّا بِفَعْلِهِ غَيْرَ مُكْرَهٍ. So someone who swears, الحالف على ترك أمر, to not do something, لا يحنث, والحنث means that you break your oath. إِلَّا بِفَعْلِهِ غَيْرَ مُكْرَهٍ. والحالف على ترك أمر لا يحنث إلا بفعله غير مكره. So if you say, wallahi I'm not going to go out today, and if you didn't go out all day, then you're fine, you don't have to do an expiation. Or if you go out, but he said غير مكره, you are forced, you are compelled to go out, someone compels you, or your house is on fire, or it's untenable for you to stay in the house because of threat of violence or whatever it might be, that's like ikrah, right? That's like you were compelled to do so, and when you made that statement, you didn't anticipate that to happen. So you didn't go willingly, you had to go because you were compelled. So then you would not have to do an expiation in that case. وَمَنْ حَلَفَ لَيَفْعَلَنَّ كَذَا فِيَمِينُهُ يَمِينُ حِنْثٍ لَا يَبْرَأُ إِلَّا بِفَعْلِهِ إِلَّا لِمَعْنٍ لَا يُمْكِنُ مَعَهُ الْفِعْلِ. And the opposite is true. مَنْ حَلَفَ لَيَفْعَلَنَّ كَذَا, that you're going to do something. فَيَمِينُهُ يَمِينُ حِنْثٍ, so it is a broken oath. لَا يَبْرَأُ, he cannot escape that. إِلَّا بِفَعْلِهِ, except if he actually does it. So if you say, wallahi I'm going out today, or today I'm going out to the store, إِلَّا لِمَانِعٍ لَا يُمْكِنُ فَعْلَ الْفِعْلِ, except if there's a preventive that's impossible to do the thing that he said he was going to do. So if you say, Wallahi, I'm going out to Whole Foods today, and then Whole Foods burnt down, you didn't know that, and then you get there, there's no Whole Foods. So لا يمكن الفعل, you can't do it, so you don't have to do an expiation for that. وينفع في القسم بالله الاستثناء إلا أن يشاء الله. So there's something where you can qualify, and he's going to bring these qualifiers now. You can qualify the qasam, or the swearing, and ينفعه means that it's taken into consideration, and you wouldn't have to do an expiation. So if you said like إلا أن يشاء الله, Wallahi, I'm going to Whole Foods إلا أن يشاء الله. I'm going to Whole Foods except if Allah, except if Allah wills. خلاص, Allah didn't will, so you wouldn't have to do an expiation. ونية تخصيص العام كقوله والله لا أكلت لحما وينمي لحم البقر. Like if you make a general statement with your qasam, with your swearing, but you meant your niyyah, your intention was something specific. Like if you said, Wallahi, I'm not going to eat meat. And what you meant was beef, specifically, not chicken, not lamb, but in your intention. So in this sense, if that was your intention, then you don't have to expiate if you wind up eating lamb or chicken. وتقييد المطلق كقوله والله لا شربت لبنا ونوى قائما. Or تقييد المطلق, which means you qualify something that is, or you specify something more specifically, or I should say you qualify it in a particular mode. So you're not taking something general and make something specific about that group that is generalized, but now you're saying in a particular way. This is what's called taqeed al-mutlaq. Like if you say, I'm not going to drink milk, but your intention was, I'm not going to drink milk standing up. نوى قائما. So you can drink it sitting down, and you don't have to expiate. تنفعه إن احتملها اللفظ. Right? These things will be considered if the words, it could be interpreted this way. غير أن في الطلاق إذا أصرته البينة تفصيلا في المطولات, except in divorce. Right? Because we say divorce, if it loves الصريح, if it is plain and simple, you use the word divorce in English, or the word talaq, or whatever language that is meant for specifically divorce, intention doesn't help here. Intention only helps in divorce if you use a word that is general that could mean divorce. Like if one says to their wife or something, Wallahi, if you go out today, you go back to your parents. That could mean divorce. Or it could mean just go back to your parents. So in this case, the judge or the faqih would ask the person, what did you mean by that? But if he said, no, Wallahi, today you're divorced. There's no asking about intention in this specific instance, because it's love sarih, right? The word could only mean divorce. You couldn't have meant divorce metaphorically, right, or figuratively. It could only mean that. And this is things that we need to be educated upon. And after these chapters, we're going to go to the chapters about marriage and divorce, and there we're going to talk a little bit more about this specifically, inshallah. والكفارة, now he's going to talk about the expiation. إذا حلف في القسم بالله أو قوله علي كفارة أو نذر مبهم ثلاثة أنواع. So the expiation, if he does not specify a specific expiation, in other words, it doesn't become an oath or a vow, but he just says, like we said, Wallahi, if you do this, then I will not eat, or I will not sleep, or whatever it might be. So is that hanatha, right? If you are unable to abide by the oath that you made, then you have to do an expiation. And it's three types. What are they? الأول إطعام عشرة مساكين لكل مسكين مد بمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو ما يقوم مقامه في الشبع من غالب القوت. So the first is feeding 10 people, عشرة مساكين, right? And so usually it would be the people who would be deserving of zakat, the miskin, someone who doesn't have all that they need. لكل مسكين مد, every miskin, every person who is in need, would have a mud. So I should have showed this before, but this is actually how much a mud is. And that's about 3 cups, imperial cups. This is a mud. So you would have to do for each miskin a mud of this, of a staple like rice, like beans, like whatever it might be, corn, so forth. أو ما يكون مقامه في الشبع من غالب القوت, or that which can take its place or represent it in terms of a meal. So they said you can also feed the miskin like lunch and dinner, 2 meals. So 2 meals, you give them like rice, and then it's also recommended to give them some idam. Idam means something with the rice or with the beans or with the bread, like meat, right? To give them a proper meal. ما يكون مقامه في الشبع, right? That will satiate them for 2 meals. من غالب القوت, from that which is kind of the staple of the place. So these 3 here we're mentioning is a choice. You can choose one of the 3. And I'm going to say why we said that in a second. والنوع الثاني كسوتهم للرجل قميص وللمرأة درع ساتر وخمار. Or you can clothe them. الكسوة للرجل قميص, which is just basically you have to cover them from shoulder to toe, shoulder to ankle. So like a thobe, like what I'm wearing, or a 2-piece, shirt and pants, that would be kiswa for the rajul. وَلِلْمَرْأَةِ دِرْعٌ سَاتِرٌ وَخِمَارٌ. As for the woman, also the same thing, but she have a khimar, which would be a hijab or a head covering, also from head to ankle. والنوع الثالث تحرير رقبة سالمة من الشرك والعيوب كما في الظهار. And this was in the age of people who were held in bondage. You would have to free a believing person in bondage. So for us, only the first 2 apply, which is to feed 10 or to clothe 10. If you're unable to do those 2, you don't have the means, right? This is where he says here, وَهَذِي الثَّلَاثُ عَلَى التَّخْيِيرِ فِإِنْ عَجَزَ عَنْهَا صَامَ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامٍ. If you don't have the means to do the first 2, then you can fast 3 days. And they could be together, they could be split up, but it's better to do them together. وَالْمُعَلَّقَةُ عَلَى قُرْبَةٍ كَصَلَاةٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ يَلْزَمُهُ إِذَا حَنَثَ مَا عَلَّقَ. And also, if there's something about, you make a conditional qasam على قُرْبَةٍ, something that is a meritorious thing like prayer or sadaqah or giving charity, يَلْزَمَهُ إِذَا حَنَثَ مَا عَلَّقَ. Then you have to do that thing if you break your expiation. Yeah, in other words, not just expiate. You don't expiate. You have to do the thing that you said you're going to do. So if you say, I'm going to make Hajj, Wallahi, I'm going to make Hajj this year if, I get the promotion. Or I'm going to make Hajj if I get the promotion. So you got the promotion. So can you just fast 3 days and not do Hajj? No, you have to do Hajj also. And you have to do Hajj. Because it's a qurbah, right? You made a vow for something that is a meritorious ibadah, an act of ibadah. But if you say, if I get the promotion, I'm going to go to Disneyland, and you wind up not going to Disneyland, then you can do these things that he mentioned, the expiation or the 3 days fasting. وكذلك المعلق على حل العصمة ويوقف عن زوجته في يمين الحنث حتى يفعل وإن لم يقيده بأجل فلآخره وإن مضى الأجل ولم يفعل وقع عليه الطلاق. And also, the exception here, if you do it with divorce, as we said. So if you say something that's conditional and you swear by it, then if it's something about you're going to do something, like you tell the wife you are divorced unless I go to Disneyland. So that means, he says here, يُوقَفُ عَنْ زَوْجَتِهِ. You shouldn't be with the wife during this time, because technically you're like in limbo, because you have kind of what looks like a divorce, but it's not really divorce, until you actually go to Disneyland and come back. وإن لم يقيده بأجل فلآخره, right? Especially if you don't put a time in, right? Because if you say, okay, you are divorced, if I don't go to Disneyland today, today goes away, what happens? Then she's divorced, right? At least one divorce, and I hope it's not the third. You did something stupid like that. وإن مضى الأجل ولم يفعل وقع عليه الطلاق, right? And if the time passes and you didn't do it, then the divorce becomes upon her. والعياذ بالله. فصل في النذر. And now we're going to talk about the vow and nadhr, which is a little different than the yamin. It means, it's specifically iltizam qurba, which is saying, I'm going to do this good meritorious act. So he says, النذر التزام قربة بلفظ كالله علي أن أصلي كذا أو أتصدق بكذا. So the sigha is different, though how you say it. So it's iltizam qurba, so something that is an act of worship, like sadaqah, like siyam, like fasting, like praying something like that. If you do it something that's permissible, then it's not a vow. It's not something that is that yalzam, yani. You don't have to be held to it. It's only if you make it a qurba, you make it something that is considered to be an act of worship to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what qurba means, min al-qareeb. So bilafzin, you have to say it like lillahi alayya kada. Yani, I will do this for Allah, that I will pray this many rak'ahs, or I will give this much in charity, and so forth. وهو مندوب إن لم يتكرر. It is recommended, or a meritorious act, the oath, the vow itself, إن لم يتكرر, except if you do it repetitively. Why? Because then you may get tired of it. And some of them, they mentioned, like one of the ways to make what is normally a meritorious, merely a recommended act, into something obligatory, is if you make a vow to do it. Then it becomes obligatory, like fasting. So you can fast 3 days a month as sunnah, or you can say, يعني لله علي كذا, لله, or for Allah, I will, I made a vow that I will fast 3 days every month. Then fasting those 3 days becomes obligatory upon you, not sunnah. So, some people said that that's something you can do to get a higher reward, because now you're making an obligatory act rather than just a merely mandub act. But, I would be careful with things like that, because now you have made it obligatory upon yourself to do that every month. So إن لم يتكرر, so it shouldn't be done very repetitively. ولم يعلق على حصول المحبوب كإن شفى الله مريضي فيكره ويحرم إن اعتقد به حصول المحبوب مع أنه يجب عليه الوفاء. This is probably the most important part of this chapter right here. It's something people commonly fall into. And it's also recommended, as long as لم يعلق على حصول المحبوب, that you don't make a condition about something happens. Like you say, Wallahi, Allah, if you give shifa or healing to my loved one, my son or my daughter, then, I will fast 10 days. This is makruh. It's disliked. Why? Because you made it mu'allaq, you made it conditional, Allah doing something for you. So you made your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transactional. You do this for me, then I'll do this for you. وهذا يكره. When does it become haram? يحرم إن اعتقد به حصول المحبوب. If you believe you're twisting Allah's arm, so to speak, proverbially, by doing this, like, okay, if I tell Allah that I'll fast the 10 days, then He has to heal my loved one. Then it becomes haram. Because this is a violation of the rububiyyah or ubudiyya relationship. Allah huwa al-Rabb wa anta al-marbub. Allah al-ma'bud wa anta al-abd. Allah is the one to be worshipped, and you're the one who worships Him, not the other way around. You don't make Allah do something. So if they do it with that intention, it becomes haram. مع أنه يجب عليه الوفاء. But nonetheless, you still have to carry out. Let's say you did that, and your son or daughter, got their health back, alhamdulillah, you still have to do fasting or whatever it is that you said you were going to do. ولا يتعين لفظ النذر بل مثله ولو قال لله علي صوم أطلق أو علق كأن شفى الله مريضي أو إن لم أفعل كذا فعلي صدقة كذا وهذا الأخير من باب اليمين. It doesn't have to be exactly the same verbiage that we said before. لا يتعين لفظ النذر. You don't have to say نذرت. You don't say I made an oath or a vow to do something. بل مثله, something like it. لو قال لله علي صوم, right? For Allah I have to do this, or for Allah I won't do this if this person becomes healed. وإن لم أفعل كذا فعلي صدق كذا. And if I don't do this, then I will pay this sadaqah. And he said that particular sigha, the last one, the formula, that's like a yameen actually. So there's a little bit of crossover between these two chapters. They have kind of the same rulings, but the phrase is, the way you say it is different. وَنَذْرُ الْمَشِي لِغَيْرِ مَكَّةَ لَغْوٌ. So if you make an oath to walk to a particular masjid or place, then it's laghu, right? You don't have to do it. لا يلزم إلا لمكة. إلا لإيش؟ إلا لمكة, except to Mecca. And one of the stories that my Sheikh told me, Sheikh Ahmed Rayyan, rahimahullah, he said that there were two students of Imam Malik, Abdul Rahman ibn al-Qasim, and I believe the other was Ashhab ibn al-Aziz. And they're both Egyptian students of Imam Malik. And they both were teaching in the same mosque in Egypt when they get back. So they both studied years and decades with Imam Malik. They go back to Egypt, to Cairo, and they're both teaching what they learned. And you could say there was a little bit of friendly rivalry between the two. And they had a khilaf. They had a difference of opinion about a particular issue in Maliki fiqh. So Ashhab says, if you're correct and I'm wrong, then I'm walking to Mecca to make Hajj from Cairo, which is, across the Red Sea. It's a big trip. And so they went and they, got to an answer, and it turned out Ashhab was wrong and Abdul Rahman ibn al-Qasim was right. So Abdul Rahman al-Qasim says, you know what? I'm going to walk with you. I'll go with you. This was the way they dissented with one another. This is the way they differed with one another. Not to see he was wrong, good for him, let him have the walk. He said, I'll walk with you. I'll go with you. اللهم علمنا الأدب. كشد الرحل لصلاة في غير المساجد الثلاثة والله أعلم. Also, if you make an oath to pray in a particular masjid, لا يلزم, right? You don't have to do it, except it's one of the three masajid. So الحرم المكي, Masjid Nabawi في المدينة, and Masjid Al-Aqsa, Rabbi Ajal bi-Tahriri, fi Bayt al-Maqdis. So those three, Jerusalem and Medina and Mecca. Based upon the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا تشد الرحال إلا لإحدى ثلاث. Some people have interpreted this to mean that you don't make any intention to go anywhere on a trip except the three masajid. That's not the majority opinion. The majority opinion is specifically masjids. So the Maliki school, there is no particular virtue of praying in one masjid over another except for these three. So there's no virtue of praying in the masjid that is closer to your house and the one further away from your house. They're both masjid except these three. So if you live in Medina and you can go pray in the Prophet's mosque, or you can go pray in the mosque closer to your house, no, it would be better to pray in the Prophet's mosque, because tashid al-rihal, you would make the trip to go an extended trip. But in any other city, right, and you can pray in the closest place, unless there's more than one intention. So we're talking specifically the intention for the masjid. But if there's intention, oh wait, over there's this teacher that I want to see or meet, or there's this person that I can benefit from, and then there's an added intention. So it's not because of the masjid, it's because what's there in the masjid. That's what they meant. Otherwise, you can make intention to travel for business, for siyaha, for tourism, for education. You can make intention, to even visit the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, specifically his grave. And I have another story connected with that, and we'll end with this. Sheikh al-Sha'rawi, who is the Imam of Egypt, rahimahullah, in our modern times, he was in Mecca, and he had told the people who was with, who were from Mecca at the time, or from the Arabian Peninsula, he said, tomorrow I'm going to go visit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then they were of their interpretation, like, you don't do that. You have to intend the masjid, not the Prophet, not the grave. They said, yeah, Sheikh, don't make that intention. You mean you should go visit the mosque. He said, why would I do that? Here in Mecca, my prayer is worth 100,000 of anywhere else. And in Medina, it's not worth 100,000 like here. It's the prayer in the mosque in Mecca is more meritorious. So why would I go visit cement and bricks? I'm going to visit the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, اللهم علمنا الأدب إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. نسأل الله لكم حسن المعاملة وحسن الأخلاق. إنه لا يهدي لأحسن الخلق إلا الله سبحانه وتعالى. إنه ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.